Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Joining me as always on Thursdays, The View from the Morning, Duane Generalissimo Patterson of the Hugh Hewitt Show, master of the universe, HUGHNIVERSE.com, the troll-free web surfing experience for Hugh Hewitt fans and listeners. He's got his after show at 9 now. Normally I would be on Wednesday nights, but I got a bit of a head cold, so we're going to do my portion tonight on Thursday night. So if you're listening to the podcast, you can tune in tonight. You got to join the universe first, but you should already have joined the universe. Duane, welcome back.
Good to be back. Sorry about the head cold. I'm really sorry it broke your streak already for Wordle.
Oh, it's the most tragic thing ever. My 19-day streak is at an end. I had not missed on Wordle. What was most frustrating is I had 4 guesses with 4 letters in place, and
that's the worst, isn't it? Where you've got 4 out of the 5 words and you've got 3 guesses left, and there's 5 different options.
Yeah, this is. I mean, it was one of those things where you look at that and you go, "Oh, good. There's only 1 letter," and you look at all the letters that are left and go, "I could make 10 words out of this."
It could be this, or this, and I've only got this, and this to try. Yes. So luck comes into it.
Oh man.
I'm at 23 so far of a streak, and I haven't. I've had to hit it on the 6th guess once. The rest of the time, I've been able to have at least a little bit of a cushion, so I didn't have to risk, the ritual Sabuku knife.
Well, I think I've gone to 6 twice actually. The good news is though that my streak on folklore is still ongoing at 6 days in a row. That's the Irish language version of Wordle.
Yes.
Yeah, one of my Irish language friends, we were talking about Wordle and folklore on a couple nights ago, and he says, I never knew that I knew so many 6-letter words in either language.
The folklore thing, is it 5 letters or 6?
Oh, it's 5. It's 5, but I mean, you start looking at these words and go, "Oh, it could be this," and you realize, "Oh, wait a minute, no, that's 6 letters."
That's 6-letter words.
6-letter words.
So folklore's got to be a piece of cake because there aren't any words in Gaelic under 8 letters, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a narrow group, right? It's a narrow group. 5-letter words are a narrower group, I think, in Irish, and maybe it would have been worse before the spelling reform of the 1950s.
The spelling reform.
Yes, there was actually a spelling reform in Irish I believe it was in the 1950s, where they knocked
the scandal of the spelling reform. I was unaware of that.
Yeah, they knocked out a lot of the nonverbal parts of words in order to simplify the spelling. And etymologists were outraged, I tell you, because a lot of that stuff would tell you how the word evolved.
Man, and here I thought the Second Vatican Council was a thing.
Oh no, this pales in comparison. I mean, the Latin Mass issue pales in comparison to the massive Irish spelling reforms of the 1950s. All right, but that's not what people come here to hear about. They're not here to hear about folklore or Wordle probably either, but
probably not.
But we're happy to talk about either one of those. We're talking about politics, and I mean, Duane, there's so much here going on. Ukraine, you've got the Supreme Court opening. You've got all sorts of different. You've got the latest and greatest versions of media bias. I don't know if you saw the Washington Post article on James Clyburn and their shot at Clarence Thomas this morning yet or not?
I haven't even seen that one yet, but that wouldn't surprise me. I'm still kind of amazed at the double standard of media, accepted mainstream media doxing of people. Apparently, if you donate money to a crowdfunding source that is benefiting the Canadian truckers, that is not only going to get hacked so that the donor list goes public, but the media has no problems posting and trying to do gotcha interviews with people about why they donated to, neo-Nazis in big rigs up north of the border. Yet at the same time, you have Black Lives Matter being taken over by Mark Elias and the Hillary Clinton team nationally. At the local level in Black Lives Matter Louisville, they just bailed out for $100,000. They just bailed out the alleged attempted assassin of a mayoral candidate in Louisville. Um, and nobody knows where that money came from. And it's racist and it's wrong to be able to look at that donor list and see who's contributing to Black Lives Matter, to how they come up with all that kind of money. We're not allowed to look at that. That's wrong. I tell you, that's wrong, wrong, wrong. But if you donate to, Give, Send, Go, or any of the other crowdfunding sources, you're subject to a Washington Post interviewer or reporter calling you up asking you what the hell you're thinking.
Ilhan Omar actually had a pretty interesting tweet on this yesterday. I don't know if you saw this, where she
I was looking for the other three horsemen of the apocalypse when Ilhan Omar came to my side of this argument.
Ilhan Omar writes to your rescue, and actually she picked the wrong target, because the reporter
of course she did.
The reporter that she tagged was basically talking about how she was working with the cooperation of the person who donated, and the reason it came up was not so much the hack, but because that restaurant had to close due to threats. But she wasn't far off. She picked the wrong specific target, but she managed to
she kind of dumbed into being kind of on the right side of the issue, which she hasn't been on anything that I know of.
Yeah, that's
I mean, she can't even get on the right side of the issue of whether or not to marry your brother.
Well, that's true too. But here's what Ilhan Omar had to say. I fail to see why any journalist felt the need to report at a shop owner making such an insignificant donation rather than get them harassed. It's unconscionable, and journalists needed to do better. Now, this particular shop owner apparently cooperated with the Ottawa Citizen, Allison Ma, but the Washington Post was using hacked data to pepper donors with calls for responses to the reporters, and the Post used that data. I think it was earlier in the day, or it may have been late on Tuesday, to do a deep analysis of the donors to the Canadian truckers and which zip codes they all came from, and and to your point, we've had 2 years of Black Lives Matter rallies turning into violence. And I'm not saying that the violence came from BLM, but I mean, there's certainly been a correlation there. You've got yesterday BLM bailing out somebody who was
for $100,000. $100,000. They just wrote a cashier's check and went down and slapped it on the counter to pop that guy out of jail.
Quintez Brown, who tried to assassinate a prominent Jewish Democrat, mind you.
A prominent Jewish Democrat for not being anti-police enough, allegedly. This alleged attempted assassin being a previous guest on MSNBC on air of Joy Reid at a gun rights rally, of all places.
Yep. Yeah, he was a longtime columnist for the Louisville Courier-Journal. And
when the Courier-Journal wrote up the story, they in the first sentence they branded him as a Louisville activist. That's how they referred to him at first. And then you go way deep down in the story, then they say, well, technically, for disclosure, he was an intern at the Louisville Courier-Journal.
No, he started as an intern. That's the thing. He started as an intern, but he became a columnist. Yeah.
I understand that, but they didn't say what he was. They just said, well, he was an intern at the Louisville Courier-Journal, and then he was also an opinion editor. He was an opinion editorialist.
Yeah, but you know what, Duane? That wasn't even the worst take.
No, it wasn't. The worst. You got to go to Las Vegas for the worst.
You got to go all the way out to Las Vegas.
That was spectacular.
Because what happened in Vegas is not going to stay in Vegas. The Las Vegas Sun. Go ahead.
The Las Vegas Sun. They have revised their editorial.
Yeah, barely.
Which ain't much better, mind you. But after this guy attempted to shoot a Democrat Jewish mayoral candidate in Louisville. Everybody knows who this guy is. The Courier Journal wrote the story of who he is and what his political leanings are. Everybody else has started to write it up. Now, mainstream media, by and large, on air, you know, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, because of who this guy turned out to be, it's nowhere to go, right? They're not going to cover this in a million years because it not only makes them look bad by in MSNBC's take, case by direct linkage, but it's a bad narrative. We're not going to cover the story. We're going to memory hole it. But everybody knows who this guy is. Yesterday, the Las Vegas Sun comes out with an editorial, you know, the paper's editorial, not by one person. This is on behalf of the entire paper's editorial board. And they said it's things like this. It's things like this shooter and this event that just goes to show what a problem we have in this country with right-wing extremist rhetoric and extreme republicanism. And it's like, you know, this guy's like way out on the left, right? You know, he was a guest on Joy Reid's show on MSNBC. Joy Reid doesn't have a lot of Republicans on her show. She doesn't have a lot of hateful right-wing rhetoric on her show. She doesn't feature it. She doesn't really give it a lot of voice. And it was so nonsensical. I mean, even Tom Bevan, our friend over at Real Clear Politics, got a hold of this and said, what the hell is this? I mean, it's so absurd of a hot take as to be inexplicable. Well, the Las Vegas Sun got pounded all day yesterday. And they came out and they revised their editorial. And they said, so while we can't exactly show evidence that he was motivated by right-wing rhetoric, it nevertheless shows that we have right-wing hate rhetoric that leads people to do all sorts of things. And they went on with the rest of their narrative. You know, facts be damned. We have a narrative. The narrative is all hate in this country is originated from the right, and that's what has to be destroyed. It's otherworldly, Ed. It's just crazy.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, if you read,
it's silly.
If you read the edits, I mean, the edits are nonsensical. Now, this is the original. First off, the original lead is still in there. A terrifying incident in Louisville, Kentucky this week revealed the dangers of the talk coming from the right about civil war and political violence. Now, their edited version of this doesn't change that at all. Tom Bevan, you know, from
Real Clear
Politics, good friend of ours, highlighted these two paragraphs in the original editorial. The alleged shooter, a 21-year-old political activist, was arrested near the scene and later charged with an attempted murder along with 4 counts of wanton endangerment. While there's been no indication yet that the activist had ties to any right-wing organizations, the shooting comes...
Stop. Nor will there ever be evidence.
Why would you even write this if there isn't, if you can't demonstrate those kinds of ties? Anyway, the shooting comes amid a rise against in threats against politicians fueled by increasingly violent rhetoric coming from extremist Republicans. I mean, this is the Sarah Palin editorial all over again. Yes. This is what they changed that paragraph to. While it's been reported that the activist was involved in the Black Lives Matter and gun safety movements, and there has been no indication yet that he had any ties to any right-wing organizations, the shooting comes amid a rise in threats against politicians fueled by increasingly violent rhetoric coming from extremist Republicans.
So fine. We put the disclaimer in there that technically he had affiliations with these groups, but our narrative remains the narrative, and it's just outrageous. It's just outrageous.
It's nonsense. It's nonsense.
How many times have you seen Black Lives Matter, any chapter or the national edition of Black Lives Matter? When's the last time that Black Lives Matter popped a right-wing Republican extremist? When's the last time that Black Lives Matter popped a January 6th protester at the Capitol out of jail for $100,000 and freedom on bond? When's the last time that happened? Did they take Viking Boy from the Capitol and pop him free on a bond?
Nope. Although, to be fair, there are people who are doing this, right? there are groups that are trying to bail these folks out.
Are Black Lives Matter doing that?
Nope, nope, no, they are
Oh,
not.
so Black Lives Matter is so they're not bailing out people that are on the right, right?
No, they're not
So
bailing anybody out on the right. I can guarantee you that. Neither is
so
Kamala Harris's bail project. Remember
so
Kamala
so
Harris's
that would
bail project in
yeah so
2020?
so that would lead you to believe that this guy is not a member of the far right,
Yes, he's
which
definitely not a
makes
member
the
of the
Las
right.
Vegas Sun full of excrement.
Yeah, maybe even more full of excrement than usual. I mean,
Yes.
I suspect that if this is the level of intellectual honesty you can expect from the Las Vegas Sun,
Then we're done here.
the
There's nothing that can be salvaged.
no, this is an unsalvageable situation, and what they should have what they should have revised this to was the My Cousin Vinny opening statement. Um, everything we just said was bullshit. Thank you.
I thought we couldn't say that on this here podcast.
I'll ask him to bleep it, I guess. Maybe we shouldn't say. Maybe I shouldn't say that on this here podcast. I don't know. So yeah, I mean that's part of the context that's percolating around right now, and you're seeing this same sort of double standard hypocrisy thing going on in the story that we just got done talking about, which is the the donors to the Canadian truckers and how
Right.
the media is responding to this. It's all part of the same hypocrisy. They're fully willing to investigate one side, but then claim that hacked materials means you can't talk about the other thing when it happens to like Hunter
and
Biden.
still of course maintaining this fantasy that, oh, we're not biased at all, we're the only ones that are neutral, the only biased people in the media are Fox News.
Right, exactly. All right. From that though, we go to dead dogs. I know you've been. I had to call in sick last night. I know it's going to come up on tonight's after show at the Universe, but let's just get this out of the way. Let's talk dead dogs.
Well, it's
It's great.
fun
It's great. It's fun. No, I'm totally.
it's
teasing.
a fun story all the way around. Okay, here's the quick setup. This is 2 days ago. This is in the morning. Joe Biden, before he addresses the nation on what the hell's going on with Ukraine and Russia, of which he really, he made a fine enough statement, I guess. He took no questions. Nobody still really knows what the hell's going on. But before all that, he goes to the National Association of Counties. Now, this is like an annual thing presidents do. They speak to the National Association of Counties. These are county supervisors, county council members, county executives that you have all over the place. This is like going to the National Organization of Mayors or the
Sure.
National Governors Association, right?
This is politics 101. This is just
politics
bread and butter.
101. This
Right,
this
yeah.
is bread and butter. This is the thing. So he goes to this group, National Association of Counties, and as part of his remarks, this is not on the prompter. This is Joe Biden winging it because he thinks he's in front of friends. Here is what Joe Biden had to say. Let me bring this up, and here we go.
I got a call one night. A woman said to me, obviously not of the same persuasion as I was politically, called me and said, "There's a dead dog on my lawn." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." I said, "Have you called the county?" He said, "Yes, they're not here." And I said, "Well, I'll get him in the morning." She said, "I want it removed now. I pay your salary." So I went over. I picked it up. She said, "I want it out of my front yard." I put it on her doorstep.
Okay, so now, when that clip got cut and it got put up on the Tweeties, the RNC put it up, and a bunch of places put it out there, and the natural reaction was, okay, what the hell is this? What is this guy's problem? Just that kind of instant reaction. I looked at that clip and I went, that can't possibly be true. It just cannot possibly be true the way he's telling it. I have studied this guy now for a long time, and how many times have we seen him craft a narrative about his own bio that turned out, Ed Morrissey, not to be 100% the gospel truth? How many times has he told things about his past that turned out not to be quite accurate.
Oh, there's been one or two times, I suppose.
You remember the story about Joey Baby and the cheeks and the train conductor and
Oh
remember,
yeah.
and
Well,
how
remember the Neil Kinnock speeches about his hard Scrabble background?
yes, exactly. I mean, he has mangled his bio so many times. He's a cipher. Nobody knows who the hell this guy really is. All we really know is, to quote the great Ed Morrissey, he's 20 pounds of bullshit in a 10-pound bag. Jonathan, you'll probably have to edit that out. Now, here's what I did. I started looking around, going, I wonder if there's evidence out there of Joe Biden telling that story before, and whether or not that may have been a different version somewhere out there, and he may have gotten some facts wrong. And wouldn't you know, I found a story. I found an article. It was dated January 25th of the year 2021, meaning this was written 5 days after Joe Biden became president. Okay. It is written by a lady named Rachel Looker, and the article is titled, Biden-Harris's Roots Lie in County Government. Now, the location of this article, to this day still, I'm actually amazed it hasn't been scrubbed, but this is on the website of the National Association of Counties. Now, it seems that Joe Biden spoke to this group last year, as he does this year, as he does to the National Governors Association every year, or the National Association of Mayors, because as we established, it's a thing, right?
Right.
So 5 days after he gets inaugurated, Rachel Looker writes a puff piece, a flowering, this is great. This is a guy that's one of us. Before he was a senator, Joe Biden was a county executive in Delaware. So he's actually one of us. He has been part of our group. He has been a guy that has dealt with county government. Kamala Harris was in county government before she was statewide. I was unaware that a county person served underneath Willie Brown, if you catch the pith of my gist. But nevertheless, this was a flower. This is not a gotcha piece. This is a meet Joe Biden, your new president. He's actually one of us. He gets our association. He gets what we do. This is a good guy. And deep down into the story, and this is not a hit piece story, deep down in the story, there is a bit where current Newcastle County Executive Matt Meyer recalled a story during the December National Association of County Board of Directors meeting that Biden had told him about his time as council member when a constituent insisted a dead animal immediately be removed from her street. Note, it's not her lawn, it's out in the street. Notice this is just a constituent, not a angry Republican, that Joe Biden was showing his wokeness 40 years ago, or puffing up his chest against. This was just a constituent saying she called the county to report a dead animal. It was out in her street, and there hadn't been a response. And so, according to this narrative, Joe Biden arrived in a pickup truck and removed the animal himself that night. Okay, that's the end of the story.
Right.
Now, you see, that's not what we heard Joe Biden say here. What Joe Biden said here, if you believe him, is this angry Republican lady tried to give him grief back in 71 because the county wasn't doing their job removing this dead dog from her lawn. And so Joe Biden didn't like her because she was a Republican, came out, and she says, I pay your salary, I want this dog removed. He says, well, I'll give you the middle finger, I'll do you one better. Scoop the dog up and fling the dead carcass of the animal onto her front porch. Now, if you allow Joe Biden his facts now versus what he has said on the record before, which is totally different, What does that say about the character of Joe Biden that he takes a dead dog and flings it up on the porch and leaves it as a political stunt?
Yeah, that's the part where the whole thing starts to fall apart, right? I mean, it's a
Isn't
funny
it, though?
line. It's a funny line. He delivers it well, but it just doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't hold together on with
It,
any
it,
level of scrutiny.
it really honestly doesn't. He's almost certainly lying about it. And and if he's
Wait, wait,
not
wait, wait,
lying,
wait, 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 wait. There's a tell to find out whether Joe Biden's actually lying about something. Did he? Were his lips moving?
yes,
Then
were.
he's lying about it.
Of course he is.
Of course he is. All right.
So yeah, I mean, there's that little bit in there. There's also
Wait a
just
minute. Is there breaking news coming from the Universe headquarters there?
What you got was the last of the homework that has to be turned in today by the miscellaneous random person mail edition with which I co-reside.
There you go.
That went off on the printer here in the office. I'm at the home quarters today.
You're at the home hub there. We have only got a few minutes left here, Duane. So I want to just bring in Ukraine real quick before we get to what's coming up on the Hugh Hewitt show and tonight's your fabulous guest on tonight's after show, because you got a fantastic guest coming up tonight.
Well, unless you pull a COVID card on me again.
I just want to emphasize I've taken 2 tests and they're both negative.
Yeah, so that's what they all say.
I found out. One was the China test, and the other one was one I picked up because my wife says, "You sure you trust those tests?" Like, I'm gonna go get another one over at the pharmacy just to be on the safe side. So I did both tests, and they're both negative. But it sure looks like there's going to be an invasion in Ukraine here. You've got reports that there's shelling opening up along the line from the Donbass into Ukraine. Well, the Donbass is Ukraine. But
right.
into non-occupied Ukraine, I should say.
Look, what it's looking like to me is Putin is setting up the premise, right? He's going to say, look, we've got a lot of Russian nationals that live in that part of the country, and we have an obligation to protect our citizens from this random separatist group that must be shooting the place up. So if Ukraine's not going to do something to stop this, then by golly, we're going to step in, because we're here to protect our citizens, whether they're in Russia or whether they're in this other place. We're gonna make sure we protect our citizens' interests and protect their lives. So we're going to storm in and make sure we are their protector and take on the separatist groups. That's their premise to go in.
Right, and they've already started. I mean, Putin already mentioned genocide happening in Ukraine, and he has a responsibility to protect ethnic Russians, and some of that echoes some of the language that the U.S. used, and to decapitate the Gaddafi regime in Libya, of course.
Sure does, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And right now, just as we're talking, as AFP reports, Russia will, quote, will be forced to respond, including with military technical measures, end quote, if no U.S. security guarantees. That's a quote from the Russian Foreign Ministry. So, yeah, they're turning the screws here. They really want us to commit to the fact that NATO will not adopt Ukraine as a member. And probably that they want us to. Earlier the demand was that we retreat to the pre-2017 lines. NATO retreat to the pre-2017 lines, which would mean Romania and Bulgaria, I believe.
That's not going to happen.
No, that won't happen.
Or it shouldn't. But I guess with Joe Biden, God only knows. I mean,
we're still negotiating. Europe would never strip Romania and Bulgaria.
I can't imagine they would.
No, that's not happening. But, I mean, really, for Putin's purposes, he doesn't need them to. What he really wants is Ukraine as the buffer state.
He wants a bigger path to the port, and he wants to topple Zelensky. He wants a puppet state out of Ukraine that he can control, and he's well on his way.
Yep. I agree. All right. Well, that's what's going on right now in the world. Dead dogs and Putin. Maybe that's the title for the Dead Dogs and Putin. That's the podcast title right there. All right. What's coming up on tomorrow's Hugh Hewitt show?
Well, tomorrow, seeing that we are, within a gnat's eyelash of seeing war on the continent of Europe, right? Could be any time today, it could be tomorrow. We're going to have a special edition interview with Admiral James Stavridis, who actually used to be the Supreme Commander of NATO,
Yep.
among other things. And so we're going to get Admiral Stav's take on what's going on, or what he sees and what he thinks is going to happen next.
Well, that's going to be good. And I advise everybody to tune in on Friday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 a.m. in God's time zone, 3 a.m. on the left coast. If you're a member of the universe, you can not just watch the Hugh Hewitt show live, but you can also watch the after show live, where Duane is going to have a fabulous guest on tonight's show, Thursday's show. Who's your fabulous guest for tonight's show, Duane?
Well, traditionally, Ed Morrissey is my guest on Wednesday nights, but because he pulled the old, COVID Central bit last night and took a powder, we're going to do the double dip. We start the day with me on Ed's show, and then we do the home and home version where I get to run Ed through the gauntlet, and he's my guest, and we're not committed to the same constraints of time, and we'll go through wherever the news is at. I mean, we may be at war. We may spend the whole time on what's going on in Ukraine.
Yep.
Biden may give a speech. We may go down that rabbit hole for a while. Who knows? Wherever the news goes, that's where we're going to go tonight.
Well, there you go. Tune in at 8 p.m. Eastern Time in the universe. Join the universe if you haven't already done so. And if you aren't a member of the universe, you're going to have to listen to the Hugh Hewitt show on the AM radio dial. Duane, what should people do if they can't find it on the AM radio dial?
Well, you find a station where we belong, and you go into that general manager's office, and you say, "Look, buddy, I've got a dead dog here. Don't make me fling this on your porch."
I was going to say that you stage a provocation. A shelling from another radio station, and that you have to seize it. You have to seize that AM radio station as
you treat the station's kitchen like the Don boss.
Exactly. It's the Don boss all over again. That's how you deal with this situation. All right. So be sure to tune in to the Hugh Hewitt show. You can also listen to the audio at hughhewitt.com if you miss it any other place. And of course, they podcast, and you can get those through the universe. Duane Patterson, thanks for being with us early on a Thursday morning, and I'll see you tonight, sir.
See you in a few hours. Thanks, guys.
All right. Stand by for more from the Ed Morrissey Show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Joining me now is author Jason Riley. He has a new book out called The Black Boom, and he is here to talk to us about this. It's a new release out from Templeton Press, just came out at the beginning of the month. And so it's been out for about a week, Jason, and you tell me the book's doing pretty well. We're going to hopefully get a few more copies sold right here.
Sure. Sounds good.
Well, thank you for joining us. And look, I mean, I follow economics. You know, I follow it, and I always like to say that the numbers speak for themselves, right? That if you understand what numbers mean, that they're neither partisan nor biased. You can pretty much understand economics on just simply an objective level. And I'm assuming that's your process on this as well. That you're actually just relying on the data here to make this argument about the economic advancement of Black Americans during the Trump years.
You're right. I do believe that the numbers speak for themselves. I'm trying to take an empirical approach, laying out the data, but someone has to report those numbers, Ed. And one of the reasons I wrote this book is I think it's an underreported story, what was taking place economically for Blacks prior to the pandemic under Trump. The media had presented the former president as a bigot, someone whose policies were going to work to the detriment of Blacks and Hispanics and other low-income groups. And in fact, the opposite happened. And they didn't report that accurately. They played it down when they reported it at all. And I thought that that was really journalistic malpractice. And they had an agenda. They felt that the real story, the numbers, as you mentioned, would have undermined that agenda. So they kept quiet about it. And I wanted to tell that story. And I think it's important to tell because, Joe Biden, the current president, wants to take us back to reverse a lot of those policies that I believe Trump put in place to the benefit of these groups. And so people should know what actually transpired, both in terms of wages, in terms of unemployment, in terms of poverty. They should know the story before they sign off on this president taking us back to the pre-Trump economy.
By the way, I should mention that Jason Riley has a website. It's jasonrileyonline.com. So in case you want to find out more about what else Jason's written, this is his 5th book. So if you want to find out more about Jason Riley, you can go to jasonrileyonline.com. What were the major features? I mean, what do you think were the major policies? Let me put it this way: the major policy choices that Donald Trump made that Joe Biden is reversing, which impacted Black Americans and Hispanic Americans, for that matter.
Sure. I should back up a little bit. This book is really about a working class boom.
I agree.
Speaking.
I am so glad you said that, because I totally agree with that.
It just so happens that Blacks and Hispanics are overrepresented among the working class. So the economic boom I'm talking about redounded to the benefit of them more so than other groups. But what Trump did in terms of his policies was really to the benefit of America's working class writ large. And what he did was grow the economy. He cut taxes on corporations. They were dismissed on the left as tax cuts for the rich, of course. But what that did was incentivize companies to bring money back from overseas, reinvest it here in this country, and people got hired, productivity increased, and that's what happens when companies invest domestically and have an incentive to do so. He also lifted regulations. He lightened the regulatory burden on corporate America. And again, that redounded to the benefit of the working class, particularly in the manufacturing sector, the service economy, and other working class jobs. And so that's what happened. And what we saw were wages among Blacks growing at faster rates than wages among whites. We saw record low unemployment, Black unemployment, record low Black poverty. So the track record is quite plain when you look, as you said, at the numbers. And it's also good to remember how bad Blacks had it under Obama. The Black unemployment rate did not fall below double digits until the 7th year of the Obama presidency.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons I think, although Trump lost the 2020 election, his performance among Blacks and Hispanics went up appreciably. And I think one of the reasons is that a lot of Blacks, a lot of Hispanics, men in particular, were seeing fatter paychecks prior to the pandemic and plentiful jobs. And they remembered that when they went to the ballot box. Trump was for reopening the economy. And these were folks who couldn't work from home. They worked in the service sector, hospitality, and so forth. And the president's emphasis on reopening the economy, I think, really resonated with them.
Well, I agree. And I think that subsequent developments from the election bear this out. And I mean, I'm going to put my tongue partly in my cheek here, Jason, because at the same day that you and I are talking, Democratic pollster Stanley Greenberg wrote in the not at all conservative American Prospect, okay, talking about the Democrats' working class problem. And this is, I'm going to quote this for you. Today, the Democrats' working class problem isn't limited to white workers. The party is also losing support from working class Blacks and Hispanics, daunting 12 points off their margin since 2016, according to Roy Teixeira. Even before last November's election, talking about the Virginia election here, commentators and analysts were pointing to the erosion of Democrats' working class support. And I mean, this is exactly what you are talking about in the Black boom. And again, this is a class issue more than it's a race issue. Absolutely. But it's about economics that are oriented to the working class. And Stanley Greenberg is trying to send off flares to Democrats and saying, you guys are leaving an entire class of workers that you claim to champion behind. And
you're right. Yeah. And this book is not a defense of Donald Trump's personality, not a defense of his Twitter feed. It is a defense of free market economic principles, which I argue work to the benefit of racial and ethnic minorities better than wealth redistribution policies and racial preferences, which is what was emphasized by Obama before Trump and what is now being emphasized by Biden after Trump. And they just don't work as well. I think the record is very clear. And one thing that worries me is that Joe Biden wants to take us back to the policies that we saw under Obama that resulted in this slow growth that we saw under Obama. Everyone says, well, Obama inherited a recession from George W. Bush, which is true. But historically, the deeper the recession, the more robust the recovery.
Right.
That's been the post-war record. Yet we got the slowest economic recovery in the post-war period under Barack Obama. And I don't want to go back to those days. I don't want to go back to double-digit Black unemployment rates. I want the fast growth that we saw under Donald Trump prior to the pandemic, and I'm worried that Obama's going to take us, or that Biden's going to take us back to the bad old days.
Well, I think that what you're seeing here in the first year of the Biden administration is a replay of the type of economics that economic policies, I should say, that Barack Obama put in place. I mean, you have a massive stimulus package to deal with an economic crisis, which ends up missing the mark widely. And in this case, touched off a inflationary wave that practically everybody except the White House expected to have happen after this, the third massive stimulus bill passed in really the same time frame as the 2009 stimulus in Obama's presidency. It's almost like a replay of what happened in 2009, only with worse outcomes.
It's exactly a replay. The other thing you have is this effort, at least in the Build Back Better legislation, to expand the welfare state. Tremendous expansion of the welfare state, not just for the poor, but well into the middle class, into households that are a six-figure income households with child tax credits and paid family leave and all the rest. This is a horrible idea. There is a worker shortage out there already. There are millions more jobs available than there are people looking for work right now. The last thing we need is more incentives for people not to return to the labor force. It's going to affect our productivity as a country going forward if we have fewer workers, but that is exactly what the Biden administration is trying to incentivize Americans to do. Stay home. We'll send you a check in the mail. It's exactly the wrong message, and it's yet again another replay of what we saw under Obama.
Why do you think then that, this is an age-old question, Jason, and I mean, it goes beyond economics because this goes into culture and all sorts of other things, but in an economic sense only, why do you think that Black voters remain as attached to Democrats? Because Democrats are really the party of the social safety net, right? They're the party. Barack Obama wasn't an anomaly in that sense, and neither is Joe Biden in that sense. I mean, certainly they're trying to expand it, but having seen free market policies being put in place and seeing some benefit from that, why do you think it is so difficult for the economic message to move Black voters from even into a position of what would be a good way to put this, of openness to change?
Well, it's not a phenomenon unique to Black voters.
That's
the old joke is that Jews earn like Episcopalians and vote like Puerto Ricans. You also have the Hollywood left out in California in Tinseltown, voting for politicians that are going to raise their taxes and take more of their money away. It's not in their economic interest to vote for progressives, but they do. More recently, in 2020, you had a ballot initiative in California that would have reinstated racial preferences in colleges out in California. It was overwhelmingly defeated, and leading the charge were Asian Americans who know that they are harmed by these racial preference policies. But those same Asian Americans overwhelmingly supported Joe Biden and his running mate in the last election. So people vote on different issues, and blacks are no different. As outsiders, we may look at a group and say, why do they vote that way? Don't they understand what's best for them or so on? But I wouldn't be that presumptuous. And many groups over time have regularly voted against what an outsider might consider their best interest. But people are voting for different reasons.
Well, I wanted to get your take on that. I wrote about this a little bit in a book that I wrote about 5 years ago or 6 years ago. And I had a chance to talk to some black conservatives and just black voters in general as part of this. It wasn't really the prime focus of the book, but it became sort of a major theme in it. And I mean, the simple answer is Republicans don't show up, right? They're not part of the community.
There's that.
And they're simply not making these arguments. And so, I mean, right. That's a big part of it. So, I mean, but your argument is really good on this, is that, again, people say, well, voters vote their pocketbooks, but that's not true. They vote their values. And unless you're talking to people, you can't understand what their values are. You're never going to be able to make a political argument.
But the point you make about showing up is as important, if not more important, than the point I was making about people voting on different interests. Republicans have tended to write off this vote. Yep. They do not show up in the communities when they're campaigning. They do not show up at the barbershop, at the community center. They don't advertise on Black radio or Black Twitter or Black Facebook. They have to start doing this. There are exceptions to this rule. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but typically Republicans do not show up. And what that does, it creates this vacuum that allows their Democratic opponent to paint them as the devil incarnate, and there's no pushback. And so, yes, I think that if Republicans would bother to go into these communities and talk about why they think their policies will leave these communities better off than they've been, I think they'll find some receptive ears there. But they have to take that first step and actually go introduce themselves.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Jason, now you talk a little bit about immigration. Of course, this was really Donald Trump's biggest issue in the 2016 campaign, biggest domestic issue in the 2016 campaign, really even beyond economics. It was about building the border, shutting down immigration. There were a lot of people in his administration that didn't even want legal immigration. They really just wanted it frozen. Do you think that helped contribute to the economic boost here? Or do you think that the economic argument on immigration is overblown?
Probably the latter, as I read the data. Now, this is not to say that controlling illegal immigration shouldn't be a priority.
Right.
We're a sovereign country. We should decide who comes here and on what terms. And the immigration laws that we have in place should work to the benefit of the people who live here first, not the people who want to come. And so I think that people are understandably concerned about a border that's out of control, and that politicians should prioritize controlling the border and tamping down the chaos that we see down there. What I address in the book, however, is the impact of immigrant labor on Black economic advancement. Right. And that's where I do not see the data showing that immigrants have a huge impact on the economic advancement of Blacks. Just the simplest way to look at this is that, there were no mass deportations under Donald Trump. The size of the illegal population in this country continued to grow. It grew at a slower rate than it did under Obama and his predecessors, but it did continue to grow. So all of this economic advancement that I'm describing in the book took place with all of these illegal immigrants already in the country and all the legal immigrants still already in the country. If it was necessary, if a necessary precondition for Black advancement was getting rid of immigrants or reducing immigrants or getting rid of all the illegal immigrants first, there'd be no book. I wouldn't be able to write about this. All of this happened. And people argue over how many illegal immigrants are here. Some people say 10, 12. Some people say, no, it's double that. I say, pick your number. All of this economic advancement happened with all of them here.
Right.
So I don't see the argument that immigration, legal or illegal, is having a huge impact economically on the prospects of Black Americans. And again, I want to stress that doesn't mean I'm in favor of illegal immigration.
Right. That's the reason why I asked it in terms of the economics, right?
Right,
because,
right. It's an economic point that I'm making.
Right, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing about voting. Voting is about more than economics. So yes. You and I are talking economics, so we're going to be narrow on that, but recognizing that there are broader issues out there in that. So let's get back to the economics. We hear a lot about inequality. We hear a lot about inequality in terms of race, in terms of class too, working class versus wealth acquisition, over generations. There's certainly some data there. You've taken a hard look at this data. Tell us what you see in terms of what the data says about economic disparities, and if we're going to address it through policy, what policies are best to address those issues?
Well, what we can do is look at history in this country, and we can look at when in history Blacks were advancing faster or slower. And as I point out in the book, the period in U.S. history when Blacks were experiencing the fastest economic gains over a long period of time is between the late 1940s, the post-war period, and the early 1970s. Now, you think about what was going on culturally in this country in the 1940s and 50s. This is Jim Crow. This is legal segregation. This is when you could put a sign in your window that said, "We don't hire Blacks," or "You can't live in this neighborhood." And it was okay. Yet over this period, the 50s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, Blacks saw their strongest economic gains in this country. It was also a period when Blacks had very little political clout in this country, in terms of senators, obviously in terms of a president, mayors of big cities, and so forth, which tells me that the people who are focused on racial preferences, the people who are focused on wealth redistribution, are not focusing on the types of things that have traditionally led to faster Black economic advancement. The reason Blacks were advancing during the period I just described is because the economy was very, very strong during that time period. And then Blacks themselves were able to take care of the rest, despite all the other barriers. The most important factor was a strong, growing economy. And I think that what we saw in those first 3 years under Trump before the pandemic was another strong economy. And the result was the same: shrinking inequality, shrinking racial inequality, economic inequality, and amazingly, Black wages rising at faster rates than whites, record low Black unemployment, record low Black poverty. Just to give you a quick comparison, the low-income Blacks, or not just low-income Blacks, low-income Americans saw their wages rising during the first 3 years of the Trump presidency at double the rate that they were rising during Obama's second term. So what we saw under Trump was not just a continuation of what was going on under Obama, as some people argue. It was an acceleration. Despite all the expectations at the time, Larry Summers, the Federal Reserve, the Congressional Budget Office, oh, we're going into a recession. Oh, we're at the end of a business cycle. We can't get any more growth out of this economy. Those are the expectations that Trump took office under. He defied all of them. And I think it's something we ought to keep in mind here, because Biden wants to reverse a lot of these policies. He wants to raise the taxes that Trump cut. He wants to re-regulate the sectors of the economy that Trump deregulated. And I fear that if he does that, we're going to get those pre-Trump economic results.
Jason Riley, I really appreciate you spending some time with us. The book is The Black Boom. JasonRileyOnline.com is his website. You can go to templetonpress.org to buy The Black Boom, or you can go to Amazon.com, I'm assuming, Jason, and buy it there.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us today, sir. We're going to come right back with more from the Ed Morrissey Show.